Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, Handling High Balances, Helping Patients Manage Their Payment Responsibility. I'm Jimmy Kerwin, a Senior Director of Market Development at Phreesia, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Today, we'll discuss how healthcare organizations can get ahead of high balances by helping patients pay in a way that's comfortable, convenient, and less burdensome for staff. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly share some housekeeping notes. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A widget at the top left-hand corner of your screen. I'll ask as many of your questions as time allows. In the resource widget on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll find two one-pagers, one about Phreesia and another about how we help healthcare organizations with revenue cycle management. We'll also feature a case study from Urology of St. Louis and an infographic about the cost to collect after a patient visit. If you have any technical difficulties, please click the Help widget, the one with the question mark. And since it's always one of the most frequently asked questions, this session is being recorded and you'll receive a link by the end of the week. Our session today will start with introductions of our panelists and Phreesia. Then we'll look at some of the data around high balances and the cost to collect following a patient visit. After that, we'll discuss how your organization can get ahead of high balances, which will flow right into our panel discussion and Q&A. I'm thrilled to be here with our panelists, Liz Acosta and Andrew Cho. Liz Acosta is Chief Operating Officer at the Carrell Clinic, a division of OrthoLoneStar. She has over 21 years of experience specializing in the healthcare industry, with experience in optimizing medical billing, reimbursement, and collections within an orthopedic practice. And Andrew Cho is Practice Administrator at Advanced Vision Care, a research-focused private ophthalmology practice in Los Angeles. Andrew is a graduate of the University of Southern California and worked his way up at Advanced Vision Care after starting as a technician and scribe. Thanks for joining us today, Liz and Andrew. And now just a few brief words about Phreesia. Phreesia is a SaaS technology company guided by our mission of creating a better, more engaging healthcare experience for patients, providers, and staff. We've got real-time integrations with all the leading EHRs and registration, scheduling, and billing systems. We're a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange, and we've been rated #1 in patient intake management by the research and insights firm KLAS 4 years in a row. Our security and privacy efforts are recognized with the industry's top certifications. If you're interested in learning more about Phreesia, you can request a consultation using the drop-down on the right side of your screen or visit us at phreesia.com. Now, let's dive into our presentation. I'll start off by telling you something you probably already know. High patient balances are difficult to collect. For the purposes of this presentation, we'll define a balance or claim over $200 as being high balance. Data from Athena Health, a partner of Phreesia, shows that large patient balances are disproportionately more likely to remain uncollected after 5 months. And even though the balances over $200 only represent a quarter of all patient obligations, they represent 45%, nearly half of all patient balances that go uncollected after 5 months. Now, this is, of course, a real problem. It's a particular challenge for organizations that perform a lot of procedures or offer other high-cost services because this revenue and cash flow is incredibly important to the business. And as we're going to discuss on the next slide, the longer it takes to collect these balances, the more costly it becomes. It takes a significant amount of staff time, money, and other resources to collect on patient balances. Healthcare organizations often mail more than 3 statements to patients to try to collect payment, and they usually do so over a long period of time. But it's not just sending mail. Staff are calling patients too, trying to get them to pay their balances, which takes them away from other important tasks, including interacting with patients in the office. So far, providers have taken a get what you can approach. and most only expect to collect 50 to 70% of what they're owed once the visit happens. So they're spending a lot of time and the results aren't as good as they could be. Ultimately, when patients aren't paying their bills on time, cash flow is inconsistent and delayed, and that can make it hard to make business decisions. And when the balance goes to a collection agency, the cost to collect goes way up. So how can we prepare patients for high balances and get them to pay their bills faster and more conveniently without asking staff to chase them down? By taking payments online and improving the overall process for patients. And Phreesia can do just that. Optimizing the payment experience to ensure payments of these high balances starts by making sure we have the correct insurance information and understand the patient's eligibility and benefits. If we do that prior to the visit, we can avoid running into problems like claim denials later. We can do this by allowing patients to pre-register for their visit. Let's consider the patient journey of Alex Miller, our example patient, who, as part of pre-registration on her mobile device, enters her insurance information. This allows her provider organization to run an automated eligibility and benefits check automatically, well before the visit, to understand Alex's coverage prior to the appointment and then discuss it with her if needed. Staff don't have to wait on hold with the insurance company, and they have the peace of mind of knowing Alex's E&B status well in advance. Before the visit, Alex receives a text or email with a link to pay her copay, which is $20. Our biggest tip for getting patients to pay their copay or balance is to make it easy. Don't require patients to download an app or remember a login. It's just another obstacle in the way of your organization getting paid. In this case, Alex reviews the visit charges on her phone and pays quickly by using Apple Pay. Mobile payment services like Apple Pay and Google Pay make it easy for patients to pay quickly, making them less likely to abandon the process. Alex can also put a card on file at this time so that her provider can automatically charge her for future balances. Now, after paying her copay, Alex receives a digital receipt via email. At this point, her healthcare organization has successfully collected her copay prior to her visit with no staff intervention required, saving time, money, and staff resources. Following the visit, Alex receives a text letting her know that she has a balance from the recent visit. She clicks the link in the message and is able to securely pay online without calling the practice or waiting for a mailed statement. As we've discussed, staff can spend a lot of time calling patients to collect their balances, and sometimes practices simply are stretched too thin to make these calls. Automating payment reminders can play a critical role in reducing the cost to collect and expediting the process. In Alex's case, the balance she's being asked to pay is high, and she can't pay the full balance right now. Financial conversations require discretion. Alex may be uncomfortable addressing her inability to pay the balance in full. When patients can set up payment plans digitally without speaking to staff, they're better equipped to pay down their balance in a schedule that works for them and are less worried about disclosing their financial situation to staff. Alex can choose a payment frequency that is comfortable for her, but also fits within the practice's minimum payment requirements. This is an important point. Your practice can offer patients flexibility while still setting parameters about how quickly balances must be paid in full. Alex receives a digital receipt in her email confirming the plan has been set up, and the process is now complete. Alex's payment method will automatically be charged according to the plan she sets up, and she'll receive a receipt each time. Payment plans are a really important option in your toolbox to help break up a large balance after a high-cost procedure. When done digitally, these plans can keep your cash flow consistent and predictable while making the payment process more comfortable and convenient for patients. All these tools work together to ensure success. Without engaging Alex about her balance and offering her the opportunity to set up a plan to pay, we may not have been able to collect in full. By collecting more balances in full, practices can reduce their portion of accounts receivable that becomes bad debt and goes to collection agencies. This ultimately increases revenue and reduces cost to collect. So now that we've seen this example patient journey, let's talk to some practices that are actually making this happen in real life. Liz and Andrew, I'm excited to ask you some questions that we've gotten. And audience, if you've got more questions, feel free to keep sending them in. We'll get to as many as we have time for. All right. So let's start by learning a bit more about our panelists and their organization. So Liz and Andrew, could you please tell us a bit about your services, facilities, and the practice management systems that you're using? And Liz, for this one, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Liz. So our specialty is orthopedics. We have over 160 actually providers. We're on Athena, our EMR system, and we use Phreesia for our check-in process and collecting money and all the necessary pre-visit workflow before the patient comes in through there.
Nice. Andrew, how about yourself?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm happy to be here. We are a ophthalmology practice based in Los Angeles. We are a single practice with about 4 different providers. We focus on the anterior segment, and we use Phreesia for kind of our check-in and appointment reminder system, as well as integrating more of the collection side. And then we use Modernizing Medicine as our EMR and medical record system.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the ways that you both ensure that you're being paid in full, but I'd like to ask first, what's the impact to your business when you don't get paid in full for a procedure? How often does that happen? Liz, how about you first?
We try to avoid at all possible trying. So we have some things in place and that we normally, if we know if a patient's coming in and things like that, we normally will put everything in place. Since you can do a visit charge in advance. So we try to avoid as possible, but I'm sure there's patients that try to sneak back there without, I'll pay it at the end, but we try to collect everything up front. Yes.
Gotcha. And Andrew, how about yourself from the impact?
Yeah, no, I think it's always a difficult conversation kind of figuring out the balance between, the business side and the medicine side of things. For us, we try to be transparent, and with Phreesia, we've been pretty fortunate in collecting some things that we require on an annual basis, like refractions, co-payments, and procedure fees that aren't covered by insurance. It's been a lot better just because now we get to avoid the conversation up front, and a lot of patients are far more open to paying when they get an alert prior to coming. It's a lot more awkward having that conversation when they're in the office in front of other patients saying, what do you mean I have to pay this amount? So that's been kind of nice. And we try to put those checks in place. And, with the different features on Phreesia, we've been definitely a lot better on getting that cleared to the patient.
Gotcha. And is there anything about high balance procedures as opposed to other types of procedures, or even just collecting on a copay that's especially hard? Anything about high balance procedures in particular at either of your practices?
For us at orthopedics, yes, we have, of course, the main thing is surgeries. And of course, we also have physical therapy, and we have injections and PRPs and things like that we normally offer in the clinic. So prior to them procedures done and stuff like that, we actually try to collect that. I would say about 90% of the time we try to collect that up front.
Gotcha. Andrew, anything on your end?
Yeah, so for us, a lot of our high balance patients tend to be for elective procedures. So it's always a very interesting conversation trying to explain to the patient why their insurance wouldn't cover said procedure or said elective addition to their surgeries. It's nice, once again, to have that transparency. I think when patients know why things are being done a certain way or why it costs a certain way, it makes it a lot easier for them to kind of digest and kind of make those payments or pay up front. we generally like to at least collect our cost up front, because for us, we understand that some of these things may not be readily affordable to a lot of patients, but we do want to make it available to them. We try to take the cost up front. If it's a payment plan that's needed, we want to make sure it's within the set time frame we have, because the reality is we're not a bank. It's hard to manage that cash flow and still get that care to the patients. So we try to find that balance, and sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's hard, but we do have a lot of luck with the payment plans, and at least making sure that we have some sort of understanding on how the payments will be processed.
Good. Love to hear about striking that balance. That's a great point. So this next one for Liz, to dive a little bit deeper on one item. So you've told us that implementing automated pre-visit payments and automated payment reminders have taken some of the burden off of your staff. Wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about how their work has changed with the implementation of tools such as those.
Yeah. So up front, the majority of the times that if we already know in advance that what the patient's coming in for, say for like I was mentioning injection or PRP, that we know that the cost of it up front. So we normally, what we do is on our pre-visits, we actually add the amount that the patient's going to be responsible for. And so the patient's getting the pre-visit, they do all the forms. So we have a staff looks at these in advance. So they're looking through the insurances, if they're eligible and this and that. And if there's a procedure, a lot of times we ask our coordinators who are making our appointments to be more, elaborate a little bit what the patient's coming in for, that it gives us so we can be able to do that. But on the occasions that the patients get an injection after it's been, it's an established patient comes in and doctor decides to do an injection at the end, and of course we always try to collect, but there's times that they'll say, oh, just bill my insurance or whatever, and we look at the benefits and stuff, and still we can't collect. At the end of the day, we actually send out a reminder to our patients, just a group one, and it'll tell them what their responsibility.
All right, Andrew, this next one's for you. You've told me that above all else, you're trying to be transparent with patients about financial responsibility and significant charges. Wondering if you could expand a little bit about how you actually do that in practice and how technology might help you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. With money and medicine, it kind of does make people nervous. So when patients are in the office, we try to do our best to kind of separate the two. When they're with the doctor and the physician, we try to remove that aspect of the conversation so that the doctor and the patient can kind of have that relationship where it's focused on their well-being and their healthcare. We do have our staff trained from our front office and our billing department on Phreesia. And so we want to make sure that when questions come up on balances or what their expected out of pocket is, that there are people who are able to answer that kind of is separate from when they're getting their health taken care of by the physicians. I think with the transparency, I think it's super important, especially with a lot of these high balance procedures, that we kind of break down why it is that way. I think one of the things that patients really, most patients that we've interacted with don't really understand is their insurance and their explanation of benefits. So when we are able to break down why things aren't covered or why things cost a certain amount, it definitely makes it a lot easier when we present them with the bill for them to make those payments. Now, one of our doctor's mantras is that we don't ever want to price people out of the technology. And so we always try to find that balance between, hey, what are you able to pay? If the doctor really does recommend or push it, we obviously make accommodations, and whether it's a payment plan or taking at least the cost of the procedure up front and then splitting the rest across whatever time frame that we're able to come to agreement with. With Phreesia and its different features, we're able to do that. And it's been a lot easier, at least collecting something versus nothing, and being kind of on the same page with the patients when it comes to that.
Yeah, and thinking about my patient experience, just myself, would you say it's safe to say that the patients appreciate that transparency that you provide?
Yeah, I really do think they do. Just because, once again, kind of touching on the fact that most patients just pay for their insurance and kind of hope everything works out. Myself, my co-payments and my full explanation benefits, despite the fact that I'm in it every day, I don't even really know what my co-payments are for my different visits. I just kind of, hey, here's my credit card, just let me know the charges. But I know not everyone is of that same mindset, especially, with older patients who are on more of a fixed income. we want to make sure that, whatever it is that we're doing, that they're understanding what it is that they need to be on, as well as us making sure that we're still getting our collections in.
Okay. Liz, one for you. You also allow your patients to agree to be automatically charged for visits and procedures. And so curious what effect that's had in your overall accounts receivable.
It actually is really great because the majority of the time, and patients actually, when they walk in, one of the things that we kind of mentioned to them is like when they pay the first time they come in, we automatically ask them if you want to keep your card on file, and half of the time they want to because they don't want to be pulling out their credit cards and stuff like that. So it's an easy, kind of thing that we give example, I mean, for them to so that way, like if they leave their credit card or whatever, don't bring your purse or whatever. And we run into that situation before, so now actually it's better for them. So what we normally ask them, that's just the obvious question, is like, would you like to have you keep your credit card on file? And they agree to it, and things like that. So it's an easy transition. And one of the things we normally do is at the end, if there's certain, we have a payment assurance also. So what we normally do, if there's the injection ones that they have not paid up front, what we normally do is once a month we upload those the balances and stuff like that. So we utilize that credit card on file also. So it runs the credit card. It does alert the patient that it's going to be happening and when it's going to be happening. So, and they have the choice to say yes or no on there. So it's a pretty easy transition, and
Right.
it works for us.
Great. And then in terms of, so it sounds like, definitely good for a patient who definitely doesn't remember their credit card or doesn't want to take it out all the time. In terms of accelerated cash flow or reductions in bad debt or anything around accounts receivable, would you say there's been any impact there from that workflow?
It has. I think it's better for us that we are guaranteed that there's a credit card on file versus not having anything in there, and so like I said, it's normally it's one of those things that you have to set your expectations up front and let the patients know that this is what we're expected, and we have lots of communication with the patient up front, as telling them that even with a self-pay patient that has no insurances, we tell them we're going to collect $200 just when you walk in, and things like that. So it's one of those things that we communicate a lot. I think over communicate with the patients, but it helps.
Excellent. All right. We're getting one in that interested to hear both your thoughts on this one around payment plans. Maybe Andrew first, though. So how have you customized payment plans at your practice so that you're giving patients flexibility while also setting parameters to make sure that you're getting paid on time with what makes most sense to your practice and business?
Yeah, so prior to Phreesia, we used to have a system where our staff would call them and confirm collections. We would have a credit card on file, and we'd always have to call to confirm that we can make the transaction. So as you can imagine, that if we have a large list of payment plans, that can just take time away from that. So just having that centralized in one location and also having it auditable, where we can look and see who's been on the payment plan, who's been paying it, who's been defaulting, has been super helpful for us, kind of keeping track of that cash flow and that income. I think for us, when we first instituted the payment plan, we didn't really put parameters where we let them push out to 24 months. And I think it was when we had one patient who was paying, I think it was like $6 a month for their remaining balance, we realized, hey, maybe we need to kind of tighten this a little bit to match kind of what our needs are and expected cash flow. So it's been great, just being able to do that instead of going through alternative routes like Care Credit or some other platforms that might actually take money from us from what we're expected to bring in. And so, especially with our high balance and elective procedures, we do set parameters that are spread across 6 months. In some cases, for patients who are a little bit more fixed or have a high balance or are in one of these elective procedures that do cost a lot, we will make special exceptions to kind of extend them out. But it's just nice knowing that, hey, we can check this system. It gives us a clear date. Did the money come in? Do we need to speak with the patient? And just having it automated really just saves us time from having to call, leave a message, email, text, paper statements, which as good as they are a little bit outdated when we have a little bit more efficient methods to do.
Very interesting. Liz, anything on payment plan terms, flexibility at your business?
So what we normally do is we honestly try to, you know, be as like Andrew said, be very transparent with our patients and stuff like that. So what we normally do is we'll kind of work with the patient, and the first thing we try to do is like, okay, so let's do half and half, and half you, in other words, collect it up front, and then the other half will next month. And you can kind of see their expressions, and it's like, oh, it's gonna be too tight or whatever, you know, as far as for next month and stuff. But overall, we try to collect maybe 3 payments of the most, but we honestly try to stay with half and half, the half and half method on there. And a lot of times, like I said, we do it in advance that the patient, like the transparency that they know, and you can see their reaction, and you can see that if you say half and half, and you see that they're not, let's work with them, you know, and things like that. So it works well for the clinic, and we have a happy person when they walk out. So
Good, good.
yeah,
Happy is always good.
exactly.
Andrew, expanding on something that you said a little bit ago. So as an administrator, what types of reports are you generating to ensure that you're keeping up with patient balances?
Yeah, no, I think, for us, it's, the balance between using Phreesia and ModMed. It's been nice because Phreesia is pulling information forward from ModMed, which we generally pull a lot of our, long-term data from. But with Phreesia, it's nice to know kind of where things are on a daily basis, a weekly basis, how we did it on quarter. And, we break it down to see how many patients are actually using Phreesia, how many are putting credit cards on file, which has been a bigger kind of push this year for our staff, just so that we can get patients on a more cyclical and consistent payment assurance basis. So with my front office manager, Deanna, we kind of sift through the reports on a daily and a weekly basis just to see kind of how we're doing. Because I think there were times where we weren't as on top of making sure that we're checking patients in, confirming their information, whether it's email or phone, and it's kind of seeing that correlate with the drop off in what we're collecting. So now that we've been a little bit more vigilant about ensuring the same information, having patients be more involved with Phreesia, it definitely correlates with kind of the reports that we're seeing with how many we're collecting in office, pre-visit, payment assurance, which has been kind of a nice breakdown. So
Great. And only got time for one more question. This one's actually my favorite. So if you could give one piece of advice, only one advice each, to practices that want to start putting measures in place to manage high balances tomorrow, what would it be? And why don't we start with you on this one, Liz?
What I would recommend is training. The biggest thing is your front desk is your front line. You need to make sure that you're training them how to communicate with the patient, because that's the first impression that they get, and how to tell the patient the wording as far as, are you aware of the patient balance, what you have today, and don't give them an option. In other words, how would you like to take care of it today? And then just leave it like that. I mean, things like that. Training is very important, especially for the front desk, because sometimes those conversations become very difficult. In other words, and just try to work on your pre-visits in advance. I mean, there's patients that pay in advance without even them walking in. In other words, so which is very important. So it's just put those things in place, and it should be easy. I think.
Super. Andrew, how about yourself?
yeah, no, I think Liz said it best. I think kind of tying into that, where being able to communicate with the patients and let them know what it is that is to be expected. For us, transparency is huge. I think when patients just are aware of what's coming their way, or what the reasoning is for what they have to pay, their high balances, or the cost of whatever procedure it is that they're doing, it makes it easier for them to kind of understand. I think for a lot of people, it's kind of difficult to have that conversation with money and medicine, but it is a reality in running the business, and I think most patients do understand that. They just need a little bit of more hand-holding, because medicine is changing, insurances change every year, co-pays change every year, and with how frequent that changes, patients may not be reading all their explanation of benefits on an annual basis. So to be able to kind of have that ability, to communicate with them, as well as make things super clear on why the costs are a certain way, I think that makes it easier when we go into these high balance procedures, that they're willing to make those payments and pay things up front or pay over a period, to make sure that we're still able to give them the care they need and we're still able to run the business in the same way.
Awesome. Transparency and communication definitely appear to be pretty clear themes here. Thanks both so much for sharing those. And alrighty, so that's actually all the time that we have for today. If we did not get to your question, feel free to leave another one in the chat. Or if you have any questions about Phreesia, don't hesitate to request a consultation using the form on the right hand of your screen. We would definitely love to be in touch with you. And Liz and Andrew, thanks again so much for serving as panelists today and sharing such great insights. And thank you to the audience for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.